All right. Hello, everyone. This is Tuesday, January 16th, 2018, and this is the weekly Sig Doc meeting for Kubernetes. Let's start, as we always do, by asking if anyone here is attending for the first time.
Second time.
Yay!
Second time also.
Came back.
Welcome
So
back.
we didn't scare you off.
Not yet.
Oh, sorry about that, Jace. Yes, this is Sig Docs, not Sig Ducks.
Okay. Well, I'll see you guys later.
Like with a really strong Midwest accent, maybe we could get it to Sig Ducks. I don't know. All right. Let's do some follow-ups from the last meeting. So for the Sig Docs Summit, Jennifer's suggestion, I think, was a really good one. And I know it's pushing us out a little later into the year, but if we go any earlier, we run the risk of people not being able to attend in fairly significant numbers. So for the Sig Docs Summit, we're looking at Portland, Oregon, May 9th and 10th. That's a Wednesday and a Thursday, and that is immediately following Write the Docs. I figure that a lot of us will be there for Write the Docs anyway. Might as well just tack on 2 more days for the Sig Docs Summit. I just need to start working with the Linux Foundation Events team to get the logistics rolling on that. But I suspect that we'll be wherever we end up, that it will probably be in a very familiar space, close to the Crystal Ballroom, maybe Urban Airship, someplace that if you've been to a Write the Docs before, will be familiar. Yeah, let's put a reminder on your calendars now for May 9th and 10th for the Sig Docs Summit, which is exciting. This will be our first. Oh Lord, are you still out talking about ducks? Maybe I'm in the wrong Sig.
My fault as much as Jace's. I will stop now.
No, please. There's no reason why we can't also duck here.
And you're talking about Portland, for heaven's sakes. You know, this is
The city of roses and ducks.
Quack, quack, quack.
It's complicated. Continue.
Very good. Jessica, last week we had talked about, we had an item last week for the follow-up on the community subpage, and you deferred for a week. Any news on the community site? Do you want to follow up on that?
Yeah, I think so. Jorge, Andrew, and I kind of worked together on a PR. I believe it's live actually. So basically, we're just importing stuff from the community repo and displaying it on the Kubernetes Docs website. So I guess like the basic version of it is done. I can find the link and post it in the chat. Just like in a few minutes.
That would be awesome. Thank you. So the heavy lifting for the community site is either done or well in progress, is what I hear you saying.
Yeah, actually, I have it right here. It's not like anything super fancy visually, but it's the content is there for anyone who needs it.
Oh, awesome.
And I guess the reason this works is all of the content is in the community repo, so we don't necessarily have to be the ones approving those PRs. They merge and then the content should update. So I think there's a little bit of automation that needs to be ironed out. And we're probably going to just be refreshing it manually for now, but the process can definitely be smoothed out as we progress.
Cool. Awesome. Thank you for that. Let's see. Aaron is not here, I don't think. Aaron Krickenberger, are you here? No. So we, as a SIG, need to talk about implementing the approval bot that Aaron is trying to farm out to all of the various Kubernetes repos. I don't know that I'm fully prepared to have that discussion right now. Is there anybody who does feel prepared and wants to lead it?
I don't want to lead it, and I'd like to have Aaron here to talk about it, but I think that there are some related things that I'd just like to call out so that the folks who are on this call can maybe also help about them. And, take a look. It's not just, sort of LGTM and approve. It's making sure that we've got the right lists of contributors who can actually effectively get those labels applied and get the merges going automatically. And it seems to me that in the process of getting those lists appropriately updated, we could also talk more clearly about what those roles mean. There was an interesting discussion about all of this in last week's community meeting about sort of normalizing across project, actually. In that case, it wasn't so much across repos, although partly across repos. And I think that this is a place where Sig Docs could perhaps usefully borrow a little more of the rigor that Kubernetes brings to the table with regard to how things get reviewed and by whom, and sort of how things get merged. Y'all know I've brought this up from time to time. I've felt woefully confused about it at the start. And at this point, I just go in and do stuff to try to help reduce the backlog of open PRs. That doesn't always feel like the right way to do things. So, and sometimes I'll get stuck, and then I will just leave something in a stuck state and nobody else knows what to do with it. And so it stays in a stuck state, and then our PR backlog gets big again. So maybe thinking a little, looking a little more both at those lists of owners and maintainers and at what those roles mean practically with regard to the bot can help us normalize our process a bit more.
Okay. So what I hear you saying, Jennifer, is that there are specific things we need to do before we can up or down this proposal, and we don't have to invent it from whole cloth, and that we can benefit greatly by taking advantage of the processes that work well for other SIGs. So
I want to chime in on this too,
Yeah,
Zach. So as soon as you're ready.
it's all you. Go for it.
So I want to go on record as saying that I'm in favor of what Aaron is proposing. The more I look at it and think about it, the more I think it's the right thing to do. The main decision for us, I think, is to decide if what we want is to sort of copy what they're doing in Kubernetes, with just having two kinds of approvals. One is the /LGTM, and the one is the /approve. And I think we should. I think /LGTM should mean technical approval, and /approve should mean doc approval. And if there is a /LGTM, as soon as one of the people with approvers, one people who can serve as this kind of approver says /approve, we get automatic merge. That would be really similar to the way they're doing it. And I come down on the side of, we get more advantage from consistency than we do disadvantage. There was some discussion in the community meeting about how enforcing consistency might sort of put a harsh tone on the process of some other SIGs. But I don't feel that way about ours. I think we would get much more positive out of this. And I don't see any downside to it.
Yeah,
Andrew is already working on making these owners files and coming to some understanding of what it means to be listed as a certain kind of person in one of these owner files. I think we have reviewers and approvers. So for us, I think that would translate to a reviewer can do a /LGTM, an approver can do a /approve. as long as we come to our own understanding that one of those means technical and one of them means writing, I think we're good to go.
I love everything that you just said, Steve. Giant plus one to it.
Okay.
I don't know that we need to get any more complicated than that. I think that addresses all of our real process concerns. Is just making sure that we are able to differentiate between tech reviews and doc reviews. And is that Jared? I hear. Tell him hi. Yeah, as long as we can meaningfully preserve separate lists, and I think that we can with the difference in owners or owner sub-aliases. I think that we can be. I think that we can implement the bot that Aaron proposed as is.
Mm-hmm.
So, is there any more discussion that we need to have about that, or can we take that to Aaron and give him a thumbs up?
I'm ready. What about the rest of you?
One of the other concerns last week was around testing and the potential for breaking things at auto merge, which had me wondering if there's anything that might be done to enable some doc specific CI on these pre-merge approval.
I'm rifling my brain to remember that part of the conversation. Can you elaborate some more, Tim?
I don't recall exactly the specifics, but there was something around a merge where, and I almost think it was something potentially specific to Netlify, where something about the Git history just broke something. But there were maybe a few cases of something over the past while where something that looked superficially okay, but maybe would have gotten caught by a docs person went through and then broke the publication.
I have a vague memory of something like that, but I can't remember what it was.
I think that what happened was we're talking about the 1.9 release, where something that looked good in the release branch, when it was merged into master, broke because there was sort of an unclean commit history or a complicated commit history in one particular PR. Steve, it was that thing that we spent like 3 or 4 hours on a Friday night trying to fix on 1.9 release day.
Yeah.
I don't know, Tim, I don't know that there's any real CI integration. I don't know that there's anything that we need to do or even could do that would make a difference in terms of implementing like the bot proposal that Aaron's given us.
If nothing else, it could be a long-term thing to consider. If we do encounter issues, is it something that could be captured in automation to prevent it recurring?
That's fair. Jared and I had a similar discussion at the time, and Jared, as usual, came up with a zinger of, are you trying to implement a process for one-off behavior? And in this case, I think we can solve it. I don't know that we need to solve it with automation so much as we just need to be consistent when reviewing PRs and say, if we see a PR that has like a whole bunch of reverts in it, has a whole bunch of rebases, just say, can you cherry pick this into a clean PR? It's a much easier and much lower tech solution, I think, than trying to automate for a case that so far is a one-off.
Yep, and I think that maybe goes back to some of what Jennifer mentioned around just defining the roles and the processes. If somebody is assigned to the role as you grow the reviewer list, to have a good domain-specific review guidelines.
And that we can always approve or improve. That particular in that particular instance, I think that we can definitely write down, hey, this is a thing that happens or can happen. Let's make sure that that knowledge doesn't become just folklore, that is actually written down, and that's on me to do. So I will take an action item to.
I don't see those two comments that I bring up as anything that would gate ahead of Aaron's proposal, but just something to consider kind of long-term maintenance-wise to be thinking about improving and documenting, automating where possible.
I'm just writing a really quick note. Okay. So no other gate concerns before giving a thumbs up to Aaron. All right, awesome. I'm definitely in favor of it as well. So yay, that's happy news. Just before we move on, Paris, I saw that you looked kind of concerned in there for a moment. So
That was me reading an email. I apologize.
no, it's all good. All right, let's move on to the agenda. So Steve, I see an item from you about removing getting started guides that result in a non-conformant cluster. Let's hear about that.
Do we have Ilya here?
Yes. Hi.
Do you want to talk about this? Or
Okay.
or
It's I guess kind of just wanted to hear what people think about the proposal overall. Do you want me to kind of try and read it out, but I wrote an email? I mean, generally, it's about the getting started guides, right? So there are a great many getting started guides. I think some got removed over time, but I haven't tracked it down just yet. I just wanted to get your feedback on the overall approach. Essentially, in Sig cluster lifecycle was a bit discussed as that. Well, we'd like users to not find outdated getting started guides or getting started guides that do not lead to the kind of cluster configuration that is supported upstream, right? You know, over time we've merged all sorts of things that people contributed, and that's great. Effectively, what has happened is that we all learned different approaches of setting up your clusters, and since, you know, I mean, I could give you an example. I wrote an Azure guide back in the day, right? And it got deleted quite a while ago, but in that process, I learned a whole number of things about Kubernetes cluster bootstrap and provisioning for resources that runs on like VMs and stuff and private networks and such things. And you know, since then I worked on KubeADM and some other bits and pieces. So you know, we've effectively all learned. It's like, yeah, but like it seems like now is a good time to actually go and delete some of the guides that are no longer maintained, or you know, maintained very, very infrequently or whatever. So the kind of fair approach that we figured out, well, thanks to Robert and Lucas mostly, is that we could enforce E2E compliance, or what do you call it, conformance, right? On the documentation that is related to cluster setup, like the getting started guides, and that would help us to see through them. Right? So set a timeline for it, let's say after 110, which should be about end of March, and then, you know, if the guide owners do not pop up and do not try to get the conformance tests running on whatever that their guides do, then, you know, we could just say that these can be deleted, and people can still find them in Git if they care about it. I mean, I guess one of the questions is like whether we really should try to dump them into some repository and have redirects saying like this guide had been deleted. But if you really have to find out what used to be on this page, go to this Git repository, right? Or something like that, or we don't care, we just want to redirect them to a page where they can find a more recent and up-to-date guide. And just sort of wanted to start a discussion within Sig Docs, because like within the Sig cluster lifecycle, we're generally happy with this approach. I wonder what you guys think.
All in favor. Yeah, getting getting rid of the getting started guides has been like one of those lamps that I rub, saying I wish. So yeah, anything that we can do to make sure to reduce stale documentation, to remove it, and to make sure that documentation, that all discoverable documentation on the Kubernetes website is current and relevant, is anything that we can do to move towards that is a step in the right direction. So I am all in favor of it.
Okay.
In terms of maintaining stale documentation, I would say let's not even bother. I mean, that's, given limited resources, we have the choice of maintaining current documentation and improving documentation, or getting better at archiving old documentation. And given that choice, I would rather focus on the new documentation rather than worry about how to preserve stuff that's gone stale.
Sure.
Yeah, I agree. One thing, can you help us understand a little bit what it means for a cluster to be conformant, and what it would mean for me if I were writing some sort of setup guide and I wanted to make sure that I passed the conformance tests, what I would have to do?
That's right. I mean, I guess one easy way to do that is to run Heptio Sonobuoy on your cluster. And that would give you an indication of whether it passes or fails, or, if it doesn't pass, it should help you figure out what is going on. It isn't something that is particularly easy, but how would user tell that whatever they end up with after following a certain page in the docs is going to result in a cluster that is just like someone else's.
Can you just give us sort of a high level explanation of what things are required for a cluster to be conformant?
So it needs to, we have the E2E tests and kube test utility, and that's like something that we run on in CI for a few different kinds of configuration, and on pretty much every change we run E2E tests, and E2E tests is what CNCF conformance suite is based on. It's kind of a subset of E2E tests from what I know. It's like it consists of E2E tests that are tagged with conformance tag, right? So you have to build this sort of user-friendly utility to do that. So you don't, because like if you were to look at kube test, then there isn't an obvious way of how do you run kube test, which is something that which is a command program that lives in testing for a repo. So if you were to run that, it kind of wants to set up a cluster for you, and it has a couple of ways of doing that. While Sonobuoy is something that you can run against any cluster that you've just set up yourself. There isn't like a way that we can say like, hey, here are all the steps that are described in a markdown file. Can you go and automate those and run the tests about that? That would be a nice thing to have, but it's not something that I think anybody has time to invest into.
I'm just wondering, what are some of the typical things, if you look at one of these guides now that fails conformance, what are some of the typical things that the cluster fails to do? Are these things like, the API server refuses to answer, the network is determined to be insecure? What are the things that the cluster is failing to do?
Those could be the kinds of things, or API server will crash once in a while, and then you'll see that some tests fail, or some particular features don't work exactly as they should. Some like, I don't know, something to do with networking, or like taints and tolerations and such things, right?
Mm-hmm.
And various different kind of features that we have in Kubernetes that are on that conformance subset. Is anyone else familiar with this stuff here on the call? I could try to describe it somewhat differently because, I mean, like, to be brutally honest with you, it can be pretty obscure sometimes. It's hard to tell why things are broken when they are. Yeah.
I can speak to it because I did the conformance efforts for the Azure product offerings, and essentially the whole spirit is just that you're not creating a scenario where known functionality will break. Like all the E2Es are just exercising some aspect of functionality. So the idea of the fungible workload is that you can run a workload on any cloud and have the same fundamental experience. So when things break, it's usually due to some implementation detail that's outside of the normal realm of cloud deployments. So usually I would look at things in the kubla config or the networking config that's in the underlay, or if there's some sort of weird proxy or stuff like that. So things, basically, it's the more deviation you have in terms of implementation details, the less likely you are to pass the conformance test.
So maybe a more targeted question is, when a getting started guide produces a non-conformant state, who opens the PR? Where's the chain of notification between, oh, this guide is no longer produces a conformant result. A PR opens, someone opens it, who opens that PR to remove that documentation? And where are the results of conformance testing posting that a PR can be opened?
What if that was a requirement of the
release? Say again, Stephen?
I said, what if that was a requirement for the release? And in addition to having release notes, you also had to make sure that the getting started guide for your platform was conformant.
I think that works for new things, but there's a lot of legacy stuff out there, and I mean, what I would say is that they should all pass regardless. And if they don't, then an issue should be created with the failing results, and tag whoever the correct SIG is. Whoever it is, if like it's an Azure thing, obviously SIG Azure or SIG GCP or whatever. If it's not somebody specific, maybe cloud or working group or area cloud provider rather, and just throw it up there, and then put something in the actual getting started guide itself, a notation that this does not currently pass the conformance test.
So it seems like we have two pieces of work to do here. One is to handle legacy material, and another piece is to handle how we gate check conformity or conformance going forward. So Stephen, that's a perfectly reasonable requirement to institute, I think, for a getting started guide for new material introduced into a release. But we've still got to work our way through legacy material. So, I'm sorry, I'm just looking at a note from Tim really quick.
So, yeah, I've not looked at at things as they stand right now, but from memory, there were guides which say, well, here's how you run Kubernetes on Ubuntu on VirtualBox. And from the title, it just, it seems like running it on Ubuntu is the end goal. So in that case, we could just say, here's how you install Kubernetes on Ubuntu, independently of what sort of virtualization thing you use. And here's your Ubuntu package, and here are the kubeadm commands, and read more about kubeadm over here, sort of thing.
So Ilya, is it reasonable to ask SIG conformance to open a PR in the Kubernetes website repo saying, here's the list of guides that are non-conformant, here's the list of getting started guides we would like to see go away? Is that a reasonable thing to ask of you and of SIG conformance?
Yeah, I'm SIG plus lifecycle, by the way. But,
oh, sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. Yeah, sure. I mean, I was going to go and look at them and sort of. I mean, I was going to track down the obvious things, right? So whether people refer to like 1.1.5 or whatever old release, right? And where they refer to something that is obviously out of date, and just look at the commit log and such things, and track down the most active contributors in that subdirectory, and sort of do that sort of stuff first, and then see also how the owners would react to this, and then listing out. I guess it would be quite challenging to run through all the guides, but it would probably be easier to reach out to owners and see whether they still care to maintain those, and ask them to consider running through conformance, and if they face any difficulties doing that, help them out, right? I mean, that's the kind of thing I was thinking of. But yeah, I mean, the list will probably include most of the things to start with. Like, we'll start with like things that, assuming it's non-conformant and until proven to be conformant. That's the kind of.
I think we probably want one separate PR for each getting started guide to be removed. That way the debate about that one guide can be consolidated there.
Okay, that's also a good strategy, actually. Yeah, yeah. I mean, I thought to sort of try and talk to people over email first as well, and see who responds. Okay, yeah, I'll note that down. That's actually a very simple one.
Excellent. Any more discussion on removing non-conformant getting started guides? All right, let's move on to better review habits. I put this on the agenda because I'm starting to notice some bad review habits across Sig Docs. And it's not evenly distributed. There are folks who do wonderful PR reviews all the time, and if you're concerned that isn't you, it's probably you. Everyone, I think, is doing really good work with reviews, but I do think that we need some more consistent good habits in the repo. I am noticing a tendency for folks to merge their own PRs without a clear chain of review. I'm guilty of this too. It's gross. It's kind of unclean, and we need to get out of this habit. I would prefer for us not. Ideally, I would prefer for us not to be merging our own PRs. But I definitely want to make sure that, that's a someday goal. For now, let's make sure that before we merge a PR, that there is a clear chain of review. So make sure that if there's a tech LGTVM that's needed, make sure that that's added. If there's a docs LGTM, make sure that that review is clearly flagged inside the PR, like in the actual PR history. We just need to see a clear history of reviews inside of PRs. Let's see, another thing that came up recently PRs opened against old branches. There was a PR opened against 1.8 recently that had nothing to do with like a navigation update. So just as a reminder, static branches or anything branches that are earlier than the current release, those are considered snapshots in time. We don't accept PRs opened against content for anything earlier than 1.9. So if something needs to change, make sure that it's changed in the current version. Otherwise, branches are considered historic snapshots. They're not. We're not accepting content PRs against older branches. I'd like to ask that we start reviewing more stringently for quality of documentation, not just whether PRs pass tests, but whether or not the actual documentation itself is clear, legible, whether it can be better. I know that we have a large backlog and that we have a large throughput of documentation PRs, but I'm seeing a lot of things like go through with mechanical errors, things that are going through that aren't consistent with good quality, things that could be better and not even like a real stretch to be better. So I want to ask that we take more effort to make sure that the prose that we're passing is as clear and as helpful as it can be. We are oftentimes people's first resource for help with Kubernetes, and anything that we can do to reduce the support burden downstream and to increase developer happiness is worthwhile. So, I mean, actually, like, just take time with the actual English in a PR, I guess is what I'm asking. We can and we need to do more than just making sure that that a PR passes all of the CI tests.
So Zach, when you're ready, I'm going to chime in here.
Yeah, that's all I have. Go for it, Steve.
Okay, so part of what's happened here is that we've been in this 1 to 2 years of just having this process evolve and trying to dig out of a big hole. And so I think it made sense for a while to just move as quickly as possible, even if that meant skimping on some process and on some quality with things matching the style guide. So up till now, that's kind of been my approach, is to just plow through as fast as I can go, with the top priority being getting through the list. But I do think it's time now to have a little more defined process. And I think we'll get a lot of that by adopting Aaron's new proposal for having the bot merge based on LGTM and approve, and having clear definitions of what LGTM and approve means. But here's the place where I think we have to be careful. If there's a concept piece that's about 6 pages long, and an engineer makes a small technical addition to that page to make it up to date with the new release, I don't feel like that's always that's not the time to go through and make sure that entire document conforms to our style guide. That would take the thing way off the track of what that engineer was trying to just get that thing done, and it would add more time than we often have to the process. So as we write up our guidelines of what does it mean if you say /approve, I think we need a document that clarifies that for us. And that sometimes what it means is that you're going to bring the whole document into alignment with the style guide. Other times it doesn't, for these reasons that sometimes we just have to be pragmatic when there's a small change in an older large document.
I'd like to speak to this too, Zach. I mean, go ahead.
Yeah, go for it. Go for it, Jennifer. I also want to, Stephen, I want to make sure that you get time in as well to talk about a rewrite if you want to, but we'll go Jennifer and then Stephen. So Jennifer, go for it.
Stephen, if you want to go ahead, I don't need to.
Oh, no, that's it for me.
Oh, sorry, Stephen Augustus.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah, no, it's super quick. I was just wondering, so when's the appropriate time to actually address a rewrite? Should it be like addressing a small change and then also making sure that you file an issue to do a rewrite later or something?
That makes sense to me. And we do have some some kind of overarching issues that I wrote a while back, and they say things like this: this body of conceptual content about a certain thing needs to be looked at, and we need to decide what goes in concept pieces, what goes in task pieces, and we need to do an edit pass for style on all the topics. So some of those issues are already there.
Jennifer, go ahead before. Yeah, go ahead.
I mean, partly, I think, to address Stephen Augustus's comment, and partly just to say amen to what Steve said. I've been struggling with this too, and what I've done recently is not always to file issues. I actually have a sticky note on my laptop that I titled "New List of Kubernetes Topics in Need of Help." And when I merge something that clearly has a bit of a bit of technical update, exactly the scenario that Steve just provided, but where in fact the technical information is in sad danger of getting lost because the thing really needs more work. I'm trying to prioritize going in and actually filing PRs against these topics, not just creating issues. I don't do it for everything that I see because I think we're still in triage mode. There's an enormous amount of what a writer would call technical debt here that we could be talking about, and we can't get to all of it in any foreseeable future. And I don't mean that in a despairing way. I just mean that's a challenge to do triage and be prudent about where we concentrate our efforts. So that's clearly not an extensible model, but in some cases, it's clearly not particularly helpful to provide edits in too. Right? There's two ways to deal with this fundamentally. You can provide a whole lot of copy editing and comments, which is cumbersome, but is useful because you're helping a contributor to the docs more about style and what have you. Sometimes it feels like there's enough of a backlog of PRs and there's enough work to be done on the topic, and the PR author is clearly just struggling to get a bit in, that I'm not convinced that's the most useful approach. That's hard. I mean, I think that's always going to be a judgment call on the part of those of us who obsess about words. But I thought I'd put it out there as a thing that is worth reminding ourselves of from time to time.
Sure. I agree with both of you, Steve and Jennifer, that when reviewing a change to a PR, it's good to confine review to the scope of the changes in the PR. It would be very easy, and I think it would be a deterrent to contribution if we turned every PR into an occasion to address editorial debt, let's call it, in every file that's changed. So I think to both of your point that yes, confine the scope of a review to the PR in question or to the change in question, but then opening a separate issue for editorial need. And I like Ilya, your suggestion of tracking editorial debt in a separate GitHub project. I think that works really well. Just the ability to look in a single project and say, okay, here's a list of articles or of conceptual content or whatever content that needs editorial review or improvement for clarity. That works really well.
So I think the place to do that is in this project we already have. We might repurpose this project. We have this project that kind of collects the things that are left over from the doc migration. But I think the doc migration is so far in the past now that we're not even thinking along those lines. But maybe we'll take the things that are already in that project, rename the project to indicate this is about editorial debt, and we can add to that project as we come across things.
I'm just looking at the list of projects. Are you looking specifically at Kubernetes doc projects, Steve?
I think that's probably what it's called. So it's sort of hard to tell what it means by its current name.
Sure. would you be willing to take on the rehab of just of rehabbing that repo, the name and the purpose?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You don't have to populate it, but just change the paint color, I guess.
Yeah.
All right, thank you. Okay. Yeah, just to affirm what everyone has said, it has been a giant crush of content for the past year or two, and I think that it's been tremendously valuable, the work that everyone has done to get content current and to get our backlog reduced to the point that it's at has been a giant labor and greatly appreciated. But I do think that we're at the time where we need to start focusing more on the quality of content, not just on the volume. And as a reminder, just for the first 2 points, please get reviews and please show a clear chain of reviews on any PRs that you merge, and accept reviews for current versions only. And
well, we're not going to be probably pushing our own merge buttons anymore if we go to. We're not going to be pushing that button if we go to Aaron's system. So this will help us change our ways, right?
I am internalizing. the what is new, the changes. Yeah. Yes, the new changes will be glorious. Excellent. Okay. Any other discussion about better review habits? All right. I'm looking at, we have a couple of items left. Jennifer, I had asked if you wanted to do a user journey update, but Andrew's out today, and I don't know that we can really do justice to user journeys in like 10 minutes. So do you want to skip user journeys today, or defer that for a week and talk about the writing mentorship proposal?
Sure. Probably better if Andrew can speak to that anyway, but for anybody who's interested, this is not the late, I'm sticking a URL in chat. That's not the absolute latest state of it, but for those of you not familiar, that'll give you an idea of what we're trying to do. Without context, that might not mean very much. So if it confuses you and you want to know more, come back next week. So writing mentorship, this is Zach's name for something that Jared and I have both brought up from time to time. It's a more elegant way of referring to getting Sig Docs representation on the more code-oriented SIGs, specifically with an eye to helping folks write better release note copy in support of the release process, although I know Nick has some more ideas for making that better, but better copy out of the gate would help a lot. And where appropriate, helping folks with doc content as well, most likely on a per release basis, although there's kind of some nice timing here with Ilya's proposal from Sig Cluster Lifecycle. This is another place where we're working cooperatively, but I'm thinking primarily in terms of how we can help folks through the release cycle. So I guess what we need, and we probably don't, again, have enough time to get through this, but we need a couple of things. We need to identify key SIGs, and we need volunteers. I can tell you one, I've already been voluntold by the Heptonians for Sig Cluster Lifecycle, and I actually get to have that information pushed to me rather than pulled, although I think I'm going to be doing some PR review on my own just to provide some coaching and attending meetings. Sig Apps is another one where I think we could really use, we tend to get big chunks of PRs coming in per release there. And I'm doing this off the top of my head, so I don't have a formal list. Anybody else wants to contribute to the list of SIGs that we think are high priority to farm ourselves out to, please do so. Questions, comments? That's all I got for now.
Oh, I started going to SIG Community.
Nice. Paris, any thoughts here?
Sounds good. I actually have a separate mentoring update. Andrew is going to do a small, very small workshop, like 15 to 20 minutes, with the mentoring test cohort that we're running right now. Again, for the people that are going from member to reviewers in KubeADM, COPS, and Workload API. And that's going to be just what you guys and gals would be looking for as far as qualities of a tech reviewer, and how to be one, where to sign up, why, etc. So
awesome, thank you. So Jennifer, I'm going to add farming, I guess embedding writers in SIGs. I'm going to add that to our in-flight project list so that we can talk about that more when we actually get to talking about prioritization in the coming month.
And Jace, I'll touch base with you and Nick too. I think we might be a good group to sort of talk about this, asynchronously. And
all right. All right. That is all that's currently on the agenda. Last call. All right, 3, 2, 1. That's a SIG meeting. Thanks, everybody.
thank you.
See you next week.